Hey everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with another live episode of the Jungle Roar podcast here on the X and the YouTube channel, youtube.com/@JungleRoarPod. It is powered as always by our terrific friends at Prize Picks and CLNS Media. Joining me once again is the one and only Richard Skinner. We know him better as Skinny from Local 12 and Local12.com. OTAs are underway. They are in their third day today, Wednesday, as we broadcast this to you. And joining in the festivities, Skinny, on Monday and Tuesday of this week, three significant players. That would be T. Higgins, although he was at OTAs prior. But Ja'Marr Chase and DJ Turner joined T. Higgins at OTAs. I'm going to ask you point blank, what do you take as the biggest significance of DJ Turner and Ja'Marr Chase being at these voluntary workouts?
Yeah, I think it's important. I understand for guys because it is voluntary if they don't, especially DJ Turner, because he's in the final year of his contract and looking for an extension, and so there is risk for him without that to come to these because they do physical activity. There's no contact, but you can always. The New York Giants, I think, have lost 3 players in OTAs to injury, right. So stuff can happen. Ja'Marr did have his kids camp in town over the weekend. I don't know if this was a carryover from that. I mean, will we see him next week for the second week of OTAs, which will be held June 9th through the 11th, and we get one day we'll get a chance to see him potentially on June the 9th, and then after that's the mandatory mini camp. He'll be here definitely for that. That was the conversation. That was supposed to be the time that he was going to show up, was mandatory mini camp. So I do think it adds to it. I think Zach Taylor addressed that pretty well yesterday about kind of, just it adds energy and enthusiasm. And, some of these guys who maybe don't know all about T. Higgins or Ja'Marr Chase see that, hey, we've got real playmakers on this team. And I think it does add some juice to it. Like, hey, the whole conversation has been everybody's all in. I think for these guys to show up for these voluntary things does show that a lot of guys are all in. The whole franchise is all in. So I do think there's importance to it. I do think there's significance to it. I will say Ja'Marr went down once on a pass route that for a second I went, oh no, it wasn't even close to an injury, but you just think those things when stuff happens in those OTAs. So there's some risk to it with these guys coming. Now Ja'Marr's risk is less because he's got a bunch of fully guaranteed money, in his coffers. DJ Turner does not, and we talked to DJ about why show up for this stuff? And he just talked about, listen, I want to be a part of this, man. He goes, I could feel the vibe when I walked in this locker room. It feels different. There is new energy. There is new enthusiasm. I want to be a part of that right now. And so good for him because he doesn't have to be here. And I fully understand if a guy like that's not there.
And the energy is the word that Ja'Marr Chase used quite a bit. And we asked Zach Taylor about that. And he said these players being here absolutely contributes to that energy. And why does energy matter in June at voluntary workouts? Well, it matters because there's a focus, there's an urgency. And I kept using that term. I asked Ja'Marr about the urgency here, and he says, we've always had an urgency to win. But yeah, when you see what the team did in the offseason to bring in different players, especially Dexter Lawrence, which, by the way, he admitted to us, he didn't think there was a chance in the world that was going to happen, and it wound up happening. But the energy that Ja'Marr referenced, the energy that DJ Turner referenced, it's real.
Yeah, and in fact, I used the story I wrote off of yesterday was about, talking about that energy and the vibe. And I'm not a big energy and vibe guy, but you can really feel it when we walked off the field from the practice going to the locker room. The players were going through one final drill. It was an end of practice drill that Zach Taylor's using, that he borrowed from a strength coach when he played at Nebraska, his strength coach at Nebraska, Dave Kennedy. And so initially I couldn't see what they were doing, and I was walking with a media relations member. I go, you know what that is? And she said, well, yeah, it's kind of some kind of cone drill. And then I could kind of peek in and see what it was. And then Zach explained it. If you guys didn't read the stories about it that we wrote from yesterday or talked about from yesterday, they put a cone in the middle and then 4 cones in a square around it. An offensive player and a defensive player have to race to the cones. They have to touch the middle one first. Then the strength and conditioning coach points to the next one they have to touch. They have to go back and touch the middle one. So it's a race. It's 3 one-on-one matchups, and each day there's a winner, and I guess it's going to compound itself over the next 2 weeks. Zach Taylor said that at that point there's going to be an offense. Either the offense is going to win or the defense is going to win, and there's some kind of prize attached. He wouldn't say what it was, but there's. No. I'm going to guess that prize would be maybe they get out of the last day of mandatory minicamp, something like that. I would assume that. I used to love when Jerry Claiborne coached football at the University of Kentucky when they play the spring game. The winners of the spring game got steak dinner. The losers of the spring game got beans and weenies. I always thought that was a pretty good little competition right there. So yeah, I don't think it's going to be something like that. I mean, these guys can go get a steak dinner anytime they want, but I'm going to guess it's got something to do with maybe that last day of mandatory minicamp.
Want to move on to DJ Turner and what he had to say in the locker room about his contract. And I want to contrast it with the 2025 Trey Hendrickson ordeal, drama, whatever you want to term it, however you want to classify it. There was no drama involved whatsoever. DJ Turner knew he was going to come in and be asked that question. And he said,
Yep.
You know what? I'm just going to let my agent handle it. He's got my back. He's going to handle my business. I'm here to do football. Oh, my God. What a difference in terms of the approaches of those two athletes there.
Yeah, and there's a little difference, though. I mean, Trey was further along in his career. I think he realized I'm going to get one more swing at this to get a big And I'm not condoning it. I thought it was childish, to be quite frank. And I made that point pretty clear at times last year that I thought it was childish and I thought it was way over the top. And again, he signed an extension before that. Nobody put a gun to his head to do it. But that being said, there's a party that does understand that, hey, I'm going to get one more swing at this. I don't have many leverage points left. I'm going to use this. I think for DJ, I'm going to get paid. I think the Bengals will do right by him. I do. I mean, they can't let both Dax Hill and him walk, and I think he's the target. If you're targeting one of the two, you're targeting DJ Turner to go ahead and re-sign. And listen, personalities are different. I think DJ Turner's personality is totally different from Trey Hendrickson's, and he's an interesting guy. I mean, what a summer he had. He took a 9-day trip to India with just a tour guide. Traveled to different parts of the country with the tour guide. The tour guide was with him the whole time. He sounded super interested in learning about the country. And then he just dropped in then when I was done with that, I met up with Jordan Battle in Japan. I'm like, okay, that's quite an off season for a guy. So I think this is a guy that just comes from a different place. And like I said, everybody's different.
Well, and in defense of Trey Hendrickson, I'm not trying to throw the guy under the bus after he's left the Bengals and off to Baltimore. He probably felt like his agent didn't do right by him.
Well, that's right. That may be right.
Initially.
Yeah.
And he had to be out there speaking for himself, defending himself, and that's probably why he did that. Now, the optics of it, Skinny, as we all know, and we went through this last summer, were not good. No. Whereas with DJ Turner, very professional. As he told us when he said, why am I, when we asked him, why are you here? He said, to get work done. I want to get work done.
Yeah, and there he was competing. The only team drill that they had yesterday was a 15-minute 7-on-7 session at the end of practice, and DJ's out there covering Ja'Marr Chase and covering T. Higgins, and doing his craft, and he's coming off such a good year that I think for him, I think he's wise enough to go, man, I'm not going to blow the momentum of a good year by having a hissy fit and not showing up if I don't have a contract extension done. I'll be really surprised if something is not done with him by training camp. I almost would tell you I'd be disappointed if something wasn't done by training camp, but we'll see. How
much of it do you think with DJ Turner and T. Higgins and Ja'Marr Chase is enough of the screwing around? We know we could be good. Let's not blow this chance. Let's get on the same page and try to play unified as one team and get the job done. And, obviously that means winning a Super Bowl, but get this train as far down the tracks as we can with momentum going into the season.
I think that's absolutely 100% true. And listen, athletes want their money. It's their job and all that. But, you still want to win, too. I mean, that's part of playing sports. You don't play sports to lose. They keep score for a reason. And I think these guys realize that front office really did do a lot of stuff this offseason to make our football team better, especially on defense. They went above and beyond to make our team better. And so, listen, if they did that there and we can come in and maybe earlier than we wanted to get more work done and to be ready to hit the ground running for training camp because of what this season could be, then let's go ahead and do it. So I think that was a significance to me to see these guys. You mentioned Teed been here for some of the conditioning stuff and some of the previous phase stuff.
Right.
So I don't think he's been here for all of it, but he's been here for some of it. Ja'Marr had not, DJ had not, but now OTAs, which are phase 3, it's now where you can do some team drill stuff. I do think it's important for them to be there, and I think they felt that importance too.
Joe Burrow, and in my takeaways I wrote this. Joe Burrow, I thought, looked sharp in 7-on-7s.
Boy, did he.
Completing a nice sideline route to Ja'Marr Chase. Deep ball to T. Higgins down the right sideline, beating Dax Hill and Jordan Battle. That was a fabulous catch. Go ahead.
So, no, it was a great catch, and Yanni Trigueros, our sports anchor at Channel 12, he came with a still camera yesterday and took some video as well. It takes both. And he said, what is Ja'Marr trying to say here? So it's after that catch where he goes above Dax Hill, T. Higgins goes above Dax Hill and basically plucks it off the top of his head. And Ja'Marr is shown his T's running back to the sideline. Jamar's doing this, almost like he's too small to cover you. It was some kind of hand signal like that, like, hey man, too small to cover you. And so it was a great catch.
Yeah, and it's good to see that compete level, that guys are actually trying to make plays in this part of the offseason. Look, I know there's an inherent danger whenever you step on the field, like we mentioned a couple of minutes earlier. But when you're on the field and you're working on your craft, you have to work on your craft. And that is the fine line that these athletes understand. By the way, on that play, Higgins said the key was to use late hands to conceal the ball's arrival. Of course, that is, receiving 101. But it just goes to show that a superstar receiver like T. Higgins can work on that, on June 2nd, whatever yesterday was, June 2nd. And work on that. And that is the kind of crap that pays off like in, December 18th or whatever it is.
It's
late
the whole
in the season when you're fighting for a playoff spot.
Right, muscle memory. You start doing it now and you keep doing it now that you're not even thinking about it when the time comes. Like, oh gosh, I got to remember to put up late hands. No, you've done it enough times where you're automatically going to put up late hands. So, that was interesting to hear.
First play of 7-on-7s. The offense did not start out great. Dax Hill broke up a pass for Andre Iosivas.
Almost got picked off.
Almost got picked off. It was volleyball, Skinny, on the field. It was off the hands of Dax Hill, then Yoshi, then Jalen Davis and Brian Cook each had their chances to haul in the ball before it fell to the ground. What were some of your other observations about the way Burrow looked?
I just thought that throw that you mentioned earlier, the sideline throw to Ja'Marr Chase, the coverage on it, I can't remember who was in coverage, but the coverage was...
It was Jordan Battle over the top and Dax Hill in coverage.
I thought that was the T. Higgins catch. Was that the Ja'Marr catch too?
Oh, no. I'm sorry. No. That was the T. Higgins catch.
Yeah, no, the Ja'Marr catch, I can't remember who was in coverage, but the coverage was really, really good. I mean, you couldn't... And it was probably 30 yards down the field on that sideline, that corner route. He couldn't have run the ball down the field and handed it to him in a better spot. I mean, it was such a good throw. And that, to me, I mean, you're doing something like that on June 2nd. You're hitting the ground pretty much running. We did see DJ Ivey intercept the pass where I think it was Dante Moore, the wide receiver, slipped and fell, but DJ was right there and was able to step in front of it and return it for a touchdown for whatever that's worth. I thought both units had their moments. I thought, there were times where quarterbacks had to check stuff down because what they were looking at down the field was well covered. There were some well thrown balls. There were some great contested catches. So I thought there was a lot of good things in a 15-minute 7-on-7 session. And listen, if that's the only thing we're going to get on an OTA day, we're going to make a big deal of a 7-on-7 session, right?
Yes, I don't think there's any doubt about that. How much? Maybe this is not the right time to talk about it, but we're going to talk about it. Andre Iosivas. How much real competition do you think there will be for the number 3 receiving job? Or is it his? I
think it's his. I need to see Colby Young in action, not in 7-on-7s, right? I mean, I need to see him when somebody can blow you up on a crossing route, having to make some contested catches. How explosive is he? I was watching him in drills. He does look a step slow out of the break. I've made fun a couple of times and said it feels Auden Tate-like, and some other colleagues just scoff at me and go, oh, come on. And I've said, nah, you're right. It's not Auden Tate-like. I will say this. He's big. I mean, you knew that going in, right? 6'5", 218, but there were a couple times he lined up, and I thought, who's 86 the tight end? Because that's kind of a tight end number. And I went, no,
Yes.
it's Colby Young, you ding dong. So yeah, I do think I think it's Yoshi's. I just don't see anybody else other than Colby Young that can compete for that spot. I mean, it's not Kendrick Pryor, it's not Williams, it's not
Mitch
Charlie
Tinsley,
Jones.
to me,
I like Mitch a lot. I just don't think Mitch does more than Yoshi does. I think Yoshi's body is just a little bit bigger. That's why he's such a good red zone target, can be a good third down target. Yoshi's not as explosive as you'd like. I think that's why Colby Young is there. I think they want somebody a little more dynamic who can, take an 8-yard catch and turn it into a 40-yard play or run down the field straight line with speed. But I don't think anybody's going to unseat Yoshi at the moment, and maybe Colby Young does, but only time's going to tell that.
Maybe it's not so much about unseating Andre Osavash. Maybe it's simply about pushing him. Are there guys in camp that can push him? Maybe that's the better question to ask.
Yeah, and that's what we're going to find out. I mean, I don't think we're going to find that out in OTAs or mini camp, but come training camp, it'll be an interesting thing to watch. But I don't see anybody that, other than Colby Young, that's coming back that you're like, no, that guy's going to take a huge step forward. I think those guys just are what they are, and they're not ahead of Andre Osavash, and that's been proven the last couple of years.
He is Richard Skinner, Skinny of Local 12 and Local12.com, covering the Cincinnati Bengals. The NBA Finals are here, but the action does not stop when the confetti falls and the NBA crowns its champion, because it's a star-studded, scorching summer of sports. Women's basketball and baseball are heating up. We've got the world's biggest soccer tournament on American soil and the first ever MMA fight on the White House lawn. Make your picks for all of these events and much more this summer on Prize Picks, America's #1 sports pick app. Legacies are on the line in the 2026 NBA Finals between the Spurs and the Knicks. Get action on the biggest NBA games of the season and make your picks on everything from points and rebounds to dunks, three-pointers, and fantasy score before the NBA champion is crowned. Prize Picks is a preferred partner of the NBA. Getting into soccer this summer? Well, Prize Picks is offering everything from group stage winners to goals scored. I'm excited to watch the big stars from countries like Argentina, Brazil, France, and the U.S. and win money while doing it. Download the app today and use that code CLNS to get $50 instantly in lineups when you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, a preferred partner of the NBA. Back with Richard Skinner, Skinny of Local 12 and Local12.com. Want to talk about Eric All, a fascinating story, and he's been through so much turmoil. I want to talk about the realistic expectations for this tight end who's had 3 significant knee surgeries. But when you talk to Zach Taylor like we did on Tuesday, Skinny, he said he is still physicality defined. When you look up physicality, there's a picture of Eric All, and the quote was fascinating.
It's great. It's a great quote. Go ahead. If you don't remember
Eric
it, I remember
All, it's a picture of Eric All trying to put his face through somebody's soul. And that's the best way I can describe him. What do you think Zach meant by that, by the way?
Oh, I think that's right. I mean, the things I can recall from Eric All's rookie year the most are him lining up like on a wing, coming in motion and throwing that wham block in the hole. I mean, he just looks to punish people on that play. Yes. And he did a lot of times. I mean, that physicality was noticeable. You asked about Yoshi, and I probably should have expounded a little further on it. I mean, if Eric All comes back healthy, and it sounds like he is, and we'll give some reasons why, and I understand why there's trepidation from everybody that guys had back-to-back years of 2023, 2024 major knee surgery, missed all the last season because of it. What makes everybody think he's going to be healthy? We'll explain that here in just a second. But if he is as healthy as everyone hopes, and he certainly looked the part yesterday, Mike. I mean, he made cuts like there was nothing wrong with him. He ran, he participated with the first team. There's a part of me thinks they lean into more 2 tight end personnel with Mike Gesicki as technically tight end number 2, because Eric All is clearly at the moment, Jack Indries might be this guy eventually, but he's not going to be this year as a rookie. He's clearly the only real 3-down tight end on the roster. Like Mike Gesicki's not, he's going to play maybe on first down at times, but he's not an inline blocker. Drew Sample's not a receiver. Tanner Hudson's not an inline blocker. Well, Eric All is a blocker and a receiver. So if you're going to lean into more two tight end sets with technically Gesicki as wide receiver number 3 more than tight end number 2. I think it's because Eric All's healthy and they've got a plan for Eric All. You saw that start to evolve as a rookie before he got hurt in that Raiders game.
Yeah, let's get into the Eric All story and why we believe,
and he believes
those, and he believes, more importantly, that he can return to the form at Iowa that had so many NFL scouts drooling over him as an offensive weapon, as a 3-down lineman, 3-down tight end, right before he was drafted and before he got hurt at Iowa.
Yeah, so the surgery, he suffered his knee injury in 2023, October of 2023. It ended his last year at Iowa. I guess the surgeons there performed the surgery on him, but it turned out after he got hurt against the Raiders and the doctors went in and took a look, there was a lot of things that the Iowa people apparently didn't do right, according to Eric, and the knee was unstable. It was probably eventually that the ACL was going to happen because it really wasn't repaired properly. He said some tissue in there was dying. He talked about wires and stuff put in there. So what ended up having to happen, he had to have 2 surgeries. He had to have surgery to take out all the stuff that had been done at Iowa. That had to heal for 3 months. Then they had to go back in again and repair the ACL that he tore in the Raider game. That's usually a 9-month process, which it was. That's why you're wondering, a lot of guys who would get hurt in October of a year would probably come back in October, or actually got hurt in November, who got hurt in November would probably come back sometime in November of the next year. It's usually about a 9 to 12-month process. Some might even come back at the start of the year. But Eric, because he had to have 2 surgeries, one to fix or to replace all the stuff that happened at Iowa, then 3-month recovery, then go back in. Now we're talking what was probably February-ish before they could go back in and repair the ACL. And at that point, that is going to force him to miss the entire season. And he said the knee feels better than it has in a long time. Since really he was healthy early in his Michigan career. So, it's not a matter of whether we think he's going to be healthy or he looks healthy. It's a matter of what does he feel. And he said it feels more stable. He said, a big key to it is making sure my quads are strong. So he said I've done a lot of quad work in the rehab process. And again, it's a June 2nd practice. There's no contact and all that stuff. But I thought he moved fluidly. I thought he did have a brace on his knee, understandably, but I thought he moved well.
Yeah, and I think that's what the Bengals are looking for. Can he move freely and be playing without thinking about it? And does it look like he's playing without thinking about it?
Right.
And that's what you're hoping for from Eric All. And not to get too much into medical 101, but what happened in just doing some background research on this, the joint in his right knee was compromised. And that's what happened. And that's why it had to, the joint that was compromised had to be cleaned up, as you thoroughly explained, Skinny. Once that happened, they could reassess where he was, go in, fix the ACL, and get him on the path to what is a typical ACL recovery. To me, you know what this shows, Skinny? He still loves the game of football.
He said that.
Yeah, and he's not going to give up on what his dream is. And just as significantly, the Bengals are not giving up on him. And I think Zach Taylor, the way he spoke about him yesterday, he obviously feels that the fire for playing in the NFL still burns.
Oh, yeah.
In Eric All, and that's why they want to keep him around.
And listen, I mean, when he was talking about all those processes, and he said, the doctor in Dallas who did his surgery, Dr. Cooper, I think it's Daniel Cooper. I looked up his first name. I don't remember it off the top of my head. It's Dr. Daniel Cooper. He said he's legit. And so I think he also really believed that this surgeon has fixed him and fixed him right. And he believes in that. We talked about this, I think it was last week or the last couple podcasts ago, about Andre Yoshavash and the death threats on the DMs on Twitter, and we talked about the humanity of these players. And I'm just standing there when we're talking to Eric yesterday when he goes, yeah, and it all went smooth. And I'm thinking, dude, I don't know if I describe this as you got cut on twice on that knee, once to fix it, once to repair it, on top of having it fixed twice before this. Okay, if you say smooth, I'll let you go with smooth, but I keep thinking we just take for granted athletes undergoing surgery and okay, the robots are going to be fine. Well, sometimes they're not. I think in this case, to the point of him talking glowingly about it, I think he really does feel great. I think he looked good, and I think all that matters to him. I there was a question early on in the process about, do you think about getting hurt again? He said, well, it's always in the back of your mind, but he said, I can't control that. I can only control what I can control, which is rehabbing and getting back on the field and playing. And I think that's a good attitude. I would, from a human standpoint, I would certainly understand if that's in the back of his mind. Like, if I get hit on a knee again, what's going to happen to it? I get it, but I don't know if you can play that way. And to me, I don't think he is going to play that way. I think he's going to go out and play as passionately, as hard as he can. And whatever happens, happens.
What were your impressions of the linebackers and the way we're starting to see how Al Golden is going to be like a mad scientist with his linebackers and his edge rushers? What did you notice yesterday?
No, I mean nothing much because it was 7-on-7. I watched them drop a few times. I watched where they were. I thought they were active at least, but I don't think we're going to tell anything about those guys till we see what's up front. I think there's Paul Dehner Jr., the Athletic, did a good piece, and he and I were talking about it before he wrote it last week about, if you look at some of the last Super Bowl champions, can you even tell me who the linebackers were? Well, you might be able to, but a lot of people can't. But you remember how great that Seattle defensive line was. You remember how great that Philadelphia Eagles defensive line was. You remember Chris Jones dominating at times. And you remember all those things. And so, go back to the Rams. You remember Aaron Donald wrecking a game, right? So you remember what those defensive lines did and how much they make those linebackers better. Warren Burks in that story was talked about. Hey, those guys were a big plus to him when he had to play those postseason games, and Warren had to start those postseason games. And remember, Warren played well. Well, Warren also last year, playing behind a bad defensive line, was the 88th rated linebacker from Pro Football Focus out of 88 linebackers. I don't think that means Warren Burks sucks. I just think it means, combined with what was in front of him, that he probably had to do too much and more. And so I think that defensive line will help. DJ Turner even talked about that too, of the added pass rush, how much it's going to help the secondary. And he said, absolutely. He said, if we only have to cover for 2 seconds, that's a plus for us, as opposed to having to cover for 4 or 5 seconds. So I think it all hinges on what that defensive line does. And it would be disappointing with all the things they've done if that defensive line isn't top notch.
In this day and age of NFL defense, you only notice the linebackers if something's wrong. And that's maybe a way to look at it. And last year with the Bengals, the wrong was they couldn't tackle. And when they had a chance to make a play in open space, they couldn't make it. And that's the problem. And that's the issue with the linebackers is, are we going to see guys like Barrett Carter and Demetrius Knight Jr. kind of fold into the rhythm of what the defense is supposed to be doing as a whole, as opposed to sticking out like a sore thumb because they're isolated one-on-one and they can't make the play. To me, that's what I'm going to look for early on.
Yeah, we're isolated with a blocker coming at them, trying to avoid the block, evade the block, and then make the tackle. How much easier is it going to be if you don't have somebody get to the second level and you just have to focus on going and finding the ball carrier, reading the key, and go get the ball carrier? I think that's going to be the key for those two guys is, not having as many hands on them at the second level, and that's because that defensive line would be doing the job that it's expected to do with what they've done this offseason.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Skinny, and something we're going to be watching very, very closely. Any other observations from yesterday? Because I was sort of, we mentioned Colby Young, and he was actually catching some passes early on in individuals from Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco working with Josh Johnson and Sean Clifford with Joe Burrow on the far field to start things out. Make anything of that?
So the far field was where most of the first team was going until they melded together for the 7-on-7s. The 7-on-7s was 1s against 1s, 2s against 2s, all that, 3s against 3s when they got to that point. But when they had broken up into doing some installation stuff, it was and just doing some walkthrough stuff, for lack of a better term. To your point, right. It was mostly Sean Clifford watching Joe Burrow on the other field, but it was starters on that field. The one thing I did find interesting, it was starters and main players. I shouldn't say all starters, but starters, probably first and second string players. How about on the near field with us, when Joe Flacco was running offense, who the two defensive tackles were? TJ Slayton and Chris Jenkins.
Yes, I did notice that.
Wow.
That's a
Now, again,
point.
We all read way too much into this stuff. I understand. I know the coaches hate that. Don't write first string. So, well, I don't write first string anymore. I write the first unit that went out on the field, which then you can read into that. So the first, in the 7-on-7, the 7 guys on defense were Barrett Carter, Demetrius Knight, Jalen Davis is a slot corner, Dax Hill outside, DJ Turner outside, Brian Cook at safety, Jordan Battle at safety. Right now, if you put together a depth chart, Mike, those 7 guys would be starters, right? So I'm going to read into that. And so when they split up, and again, that may have been a little different scenario, but it was Chris Jenkins is technically at his defensive tackle position, number 3 behind Jonathan Allen and B.J. Hill, and whatever order you want to put them in. The nose tackle spot, I would have thought T.J. Slayton was the guy right behind Dexter Lawrence. Maybe not. Maybe it is McKinley Jackson because McKinley was on that field. Again.
Well, that's that is
yes,
a jump
correct.
for me to make in my mind.
Right. But it was really interesting that all of a sudden I'm looking on this field where I'm watching backup running backs, Kendall Milton, take handoffs, and it was a second string offensive line was in there doing that stuff, and second team, third team linebackers and third team corners. That you had TJ Slayton, and Chris Jenkins. I just found it. You asked it. I found it interesting.
What about DJ Turner and the story, the anecdote that Zach Taylor mentioned about awarding him the number 0? And because the backstory here, Jesse Bates begged and begged and begged for the number 3 when he was here with Cincinnati.
Because he's Jesse Bates the third.
And because he's Jesse Bates the third, and he wanted it. But the Bengals never conceded that. They never got that done, right? But he goes to Atlanta. What number does he get? He finally gets his number. But I'm just curious your take on the DJ Turner finally getting that number 0 and becoming the first Bengal ever to wear that numeral.
Yeah, and the fact that Zach capitulated on it here. So I asked him when I talked to him yesterday about why the number changed, and he said, in college I wore number 5. I kind of wanted a single digit number, and he goes, all of a sudden I just thought, why not 0? I said, no special significance. I just thought, why not 0? And so then Zach brought up the fact that he came to him and dropped the anecdote about Jesse Bates and said, I finally decided, okay, 0 is a special number. You've earned it, and so I'll let you wear number 0. And here he is wearing number 0 this year.
Are you surprised nobody in Bengal history has ever not wearing that number?
I'll be honest, I think at one point in time, I know there was 00 Gus Otto, the center for the Oakland Raiders back in the day. I don't know of anybody else for the long time that wore the number 0, though. In fact, remember when they went to the numbering system where quarterbacks had to be, I think it was 1 through 19, I think. Running backs had to be 20 through 49. Wide receivers had to be in the 80s. Defensive players had to be, so there were certain numbering systems. Now that's kind of gone out the window for skill position players. Like they can be any number 1 through whatever, 4 or 0 through 40 at any position group, 0 through 40 at any position group, and 80 and higher. Not 80 to 89, excuse me. The NFL's changed that. That's why we now see wide receivers wearing single digits, or Justin Jefferson wearing 18, Ja'Marr Chase wearing number 1. For a long time they couldn't do that. So no, I guess I'm not surprised. And for some reason I'd have to go back and look. I don't know if back in the day you were allowed to wear number 0. And so maybe that's why there wasn't one. Obviously you are now allowed to do that. You've been allowed to do that for a while. So maybe surprising nobody's done that. But here we got our first guy. We got our first 0.
Were you in on the T. Higgins scrum?
No, I was talking to another player. I'm doing a story on Javon Foster, who's kind of fighting for the swing tackle spot. So it was a busy day in the locker room. I didn't think they'd make much news, or T would make a whole lot of news. He's interesting, but I had elsewhere to go, and then jumped in with DJ Turner, jumped in with Eric All, and it was actually for a random usually this part of the offseason is just really slow. It was a good busy Tuesday.
It was a great busy Tuesday. My head was spinning when I walked out of there because you and me, you know how I always bitch and moan when I walk out of there. Of course, it's me. It's Trags. But I wonder, how am I going to process all of this? How am I going to digest all of this information? Yesterday was one of those days where there was a lot to digest, but at the end of the day, you had a great meal of football. That's the way I'm going to look at it. I'm going to ask you one more question, and it's T. Higgins and flag football. I found it fascinating that he'd be interested, but he'd have to give it some consideration about whether or not he would play it in the Olympics. What do you think he means by that?
Well, there's a risk. I mean, he understands there's a risk. Flag football sounds like fun and games until you go high point a pass and land awkwardly, right? I mean, is that risk really worth it? And I think that's going to be a fine line. I mean, hey, representing your country in any sport is an honor. There's no question about that. I think the athletes clearly know that. But again, there's a real risk here in that. I mean, when I watched Joe Burrow in that flag football game, I thought, man, you are taking an unneeded risk here, guy. And, almost got his pants pulled off once. I mean, got knocked out of bounds once. Like, is this really worth it? And to some degree, I almost thought that was selfish to do it. I hate to say that, but I thought that was selfish to do.
So did you notice Burrow, in individual quarterback drills or even in team drills where they're throwing the pass, throwing to wide receivers? They'll go down to one end and then the quarterback will run down and then they'll run back and, alternate ends of the field. When Burrow ran down one time, he mimicked what he did in the flag football game where he made the spin move. Did you see that?
Did not see that. Oh, my goodness.
I rolled my eyes and I'm like, oh, please, Joe, please don't. Go ahead.
And that's the thing. We're so conditioned right now to hoping that guy does it. It's more, anytime he does something, it's like you just hope he doesn't get hurt. And that's probably a terrible place to be, as opposed to going, he's playing football. There's risk involved. Something might happen. Something might not.
Of course. And we always used to do that with Brady. And, anybody would breathe on Brady at practice. Everybody would be like, but right. And Belichick, had his famous line about playing Brady in a preseason game. It's football. Football players play football. I'm like, yep, that's true. And that's what it is. And you've got to accept that when these guys step onto the field at some point, and I'm guilty of this too, but when guys step onto the field, they're putting themselves at risk. My only issue with the Joe Burrow playing flag football in that exhibition, wherever it was in the off season, was it necessary? Did he really have to do that?
Well, again, I mean, the one thing he said, he wants to be an ambassador for the sport, and flag football is a big deal to the NFL right now. I mean, it's a big deal to the league, and I think he feels like if I can help expand that brand, I'm going to do it. If I can help expand the Bengals brand, I'm going to do it. If I can help expand just the game of football itself by playing in Madrid, I'm going to do it. So I think some of that, he looks at himself in that regard. But yeah, to your point, was it necessary? No. Is it necessary to play in the Olympics? No. The Olympics, I'll give a little, in my mind, there's some leeway there again, because you are representing your country. It is a big deal to do that. And I can kind of get that, but there's risk involved.
Anything else on your mind?
No, it's just be sweating like crazy people come July. I mean, not only was it a busy day, off the field yesterday, it was a beautiful day to be outside watching a practice.
Spectacular. Great. It would have been a great day to be on the ninth hole at Blue Ridge.
It would have been that too. That's a good point.
But it was a spectacular day. Again, to refresh the schedule, the Bengals will have another week of OTAs next week.
June 9th, or the 9th to the 11th. Yep.
Right. And then the week after that will be mandatory mini camp. By the way, it is late this year, and Zach Taylor talked about that on Tuesday.
Yeah, because the season starts later. In fact, training camp, I don't have a calendar in front of me. I think
27th of July.
27th of July is Mock Turtle Soup Day, the media day, and then usually camp's that Wednesday or Thursday after. So camp this year will start somewhere around the 29th or 30th. We haven't got the camp schedule yet. So that's about a week later than it's normally been too, because the season itself also starts a week later. It starts after Labor Day, which is later this year. So everything's kind of pushed back a full week. There's one other piece of news from yesterday, and maybe people caught it, but if you didn't, is the fact the Bengals will have a joint practice with the Chicago Bears. That'll be on Thursday, August the 20th, 2 days before the two teams play their preseason game at Paycor Stadium. So if you're coming down to practice that day, it will be a joint practice, and those are always festive.
Well, obviously, Zach Taylor has a good relationship with the Bears head coach. What do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that I think the ones he's had, Sean McVay, even though they got in a fight, not those two got in a fight, those two teams got in a fight. That was more Cordy Glenn getting his ass kicked. That's why that fight started. But he has a relationship with McVay, so he knows how they can converse about how they want the practice to be run without any, fussing back and forth. Same thing with Matt LaFleur and the Packers when they came down here. He went up a couple years ago with Matt Nagy when he was the coach of the Bears. Now he has a relationship with Ben. I think that helps the relationship of how do we want to structure the practice without going, well, I want to do it my way. Well, I want to do it my way. Of kind of coming to a consensus of how you want these joint practice or the joint practice to be structured. I think it's really important.
Yeah, Ben Johnson, the head coach of the Bears, is somebody that Zach has a good relationship with. If I'm not mistaken, wasn't it, the Ben Johnson had those trick plays. I don't know if they were trick plays necessarily when the Bears came back and beat the Bengals. That, of course, that game is known for the missed tackle of Jordan Battle that sent the Bears on to a last-minute victory. But I wonder if Ben Johnson and Zach Taylor talk about trick plays during that.
They might. Well, I think Ben showed off some trick plays that day, did he not? To show that I've got some bag of tricks.
He did, and he did it. I think it was more than just his quarterback, Caleb
Williams.
Miller. Thank you, Caleb.
I think Caleb Williams caught a pass that day, did he not?
He did. That was one of the trick plays, and I find that fascinating in the off season when coaches get together. What kind of ideas do they exchange? I mean, it's a great way for coaches to learn from. Coaches are always learning. They're always. The NFL is called a copycat league, and it has been for decades. But in a situation like that, I think a lot of coaches do share ideas.
Oh, dude! For those of you, I coach high school basketball. When I go have a beer with coaches, we're either moving salt and pepper shakers around with stuff or doodling stuff on napkins and showing, hey, what if we do this way? I mean, you just do it. It's a good way to brainstorm. Everybody steals from everybody.
Yes, we do. And I shouldn't say this because it sounds journalistically not ethical, but we steal concepts.
Yes, concepts. I like that.
From other journalists and other podcasters and whatnot. What's up on local12.com?
Yeah, just to kind of a recap of Zach Taylor's press conference, more leaning towards him talking about the vibe. I kind of led with that drill and just the energy of that drill at the end of practice. That was really palpable. I mean, you could hear it, you could sense it, you could feel it, that there was a real competition, but a real camaraderie as the offense was going against the defense in that drill. The Eric All story will be up shortly from yesterday. I'll have a story on DJ Turner and then Javon Foster, who again, interesting guy, was a fourth-round pick of the Jaguars in 2024, and they cut him last year. The Bengals signed him to the practice squad. You can say, oh, boy, that's a kind of a red flag, a team giving up on a rookie that quickly. Well, that may be the case. That may not be the case. It was a new coaching staff in Jacksonville. They brought in a bunch of offensive linemen in the offseason. It kind of became a numbers game. So while we look at Cody Ford as the presumptive swing tackle heading into this year, could Javon Foster give him a run for his money? We'll find out.
All right, he is Richard Skinner, does a fabulous job, as always, covering all things Cincinnati Bengals and the National Football League. My name is Mike Petralia Trags. You can follow my work at CLNS Cincy with a Y.com. Also follow my interviews and highlights from yesterday's Bengals OTA practice outside on the Kettering Health Bengals practice field. On the X, at Trags, Trags. And as always, follow this very channel, the Jungle Roar podcast on the YouTube page, youtube.com/@JungleRoarPod. He is Richard Skinner. I'm Mike Petralia. You know the drill. Until next time, keep that jungle roaring.